Looking forward to other news. This isn't even the Daily News. With the recent hiring of Zinedine Zidane back at Real Madrid and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer attempting to take the reins full-time at his former club Manchester United, it got me thinking, which other players have had a successful career both on and off the pitch for their club or country? So that's what I'll be looking at today. Some of the best trophy-filled careers from 10 footballers who both successfully played for and managed the same team. First off, and I will set out just a few criteria for this video. It's not the top 10 of all time, it's just some of the best of all time. And secondly, I'm counting major European and domestic trophies. So for those of you who are fans of the Super Cups or the Intertoto Fairs, whatever from years ago, I'm sorry, this video is probably not for you. But anyway, moving on to the first one, and with 6 trophies to his name, both on and off the pitch, it's Diego Simeone. The Argentinian's tenacious style of play has transmitted into management, and you can see why he's been so successful at Atletico Madrid. I say so successful because he's been managing in a decade which has been absolutely dominated by Barcelona and by Real Madrid a little bit too. So for him to have won La Liga, 1 Copa del Rey and 2 Europa League winners medals, along with 2 appearances in the final of the Champions League, well, I think that's pretty good going. As for a player on the pitch, he managed to win 1 La Liga and 1 Copa del Rey title in the famous red and white, so you can see why he's so adored in those parts of Madrid. As mentioned before, he did make it to 2 Champions League finals as a manager, but lost out both times to arch rivals Real Madrid, so he doesn't need to be reminded about what could have been. Imagine if he had brought home those 2 trophies. He'd probably have a statue outside the stadium by now. Next up, and taking a trip across town to Atleti's main rivals, and it's Real Madrid. Los Blancos fans will feel that anything is possible now that Zinedine Zidane is back at the club because of what he managed to achieve in the last few years. Prior to leaving the club last May, he won 4 major domestic trophies in the space of 2.5 years. There were 3 Champions League titles back-to-back and 1 La Liga title back in 2017, which briefly saw an end to the dominance that Barcelona had over the league. The real surprise from Zinedine Zidane's time at Real Madrid was when he was a player, as during the 5 years he only won 1 La Liga and 1 Champions League. I say only because when you look at the Galacticos they had in the team at that time, on paper they should have been destroying everybody. There was Roberto Carlos, David Beckham, Raul, of course there was Zidane, Figo was in there as well, Iker Casillas. They had so many unbelievable players, that's a bit of a surprise they didn't win more. However, with Zidane back at the helm, as I said, at Real Madrid, you can be sure that he'll be adding to the 6 trophies he currently has with the the light went out, Ryan. He'll definitely be looking to add to the 6 major titles he has with Los Blancos. I'm sure he'll be doing that in the few years up and coming, so maybe if we revisited this topic in quite a while, he'll be higher up the list. Now into number 8, and someone whose modest number of trophies for his whole career at just 7 is something which doesn't really bring to justice what he achieved, especially on an international level. For Didier Deschamps, there are 2 teams which hit the current billing for this video. One of them is his time playing and managing for Marseille, and the other one is his national team, France. So first off, let's talk about Marseille. As a manager, he managed to win them the title back in 2010, but it was as a player where he really made his name. He brought them 2 league titles back in the early 90s and was part of the squad that won the 1992-93 Champions League, the first since the rebranding from the European Cup. However, despite this and some success elsewhere as a manager, it was with his national team that he really cemented his legacy. Back in 1998, Didier Deschamps was part of the French team that won the World Cup on home soil. 2 years later, they were at it again as they managed to win Euro 2000. And then, just when you thought he couldn't do any more for the French fans, he went and managed the team to another World Cup title last summer in Russia, fully cementing himself as one of the best French players and managers ever to be involved in football. With this amazing feat as well, he became only the 2nd ever player/manager to win the World Cup as both a player and manager. The other is further up on this list. But before we get to him, let's bring in our first manager from Serie A, who is actually one of the most successful managers in European history, just not all for the same club. When it comes to AC Milan though, Carlo Ancelotti has played a massive part in their fantastic European history. As a player, he was involved in 2 teams which won 2 European Cups, and later on he led them to 2 Champions League titles. It would have been 3 had Liverpool not did what they did that famous night in Istanbul. Ironically though, that wasn't the first time that Carlo Ancelotti had found himself in that specific predicament in a European Cup final. Back in 1984, his Roma side, when he was a player, reached the cup final. However, Ancelotti was injured, so he had to watch from the sidelines as Roma lost to Liverpool on penalties. The chance of lightning striking twice are absolutely ridiculous, so Ancelotti must have been even more bitter when that happened in 2005. As for the rest of his career though, if you add in 3 more Serie A titles and a Coppa Italia title, you can see why he is so much adored by the Rossoneri. Okay, moving swiftly on to number 6, and it is a manager who started this decade's complete and utter domination of Serie A by Juventus. Antonio Conte won 3 Serie A's in a row for Juve, and they are now well on their way to an 8th straight title. 8, coincidentally, is the number of trophies that Antonio Conte has with the club. During his 13 years as a player for Juventus, he actually won 5 Serie A titles, 1 UEFA Cup, 1 Coppa Italia, and 1 Champions League. Had Juve's grip on the Coppa Italia in the last few years started a couple of years early, he would have been able to add more trophies into his cabinet. However, the 4 years that Juve won the trophy back-to-back started the season after Conte left to coach the national team. Into the top 5 now, and a man whose success is even more amazing considering the fact he didn't actually hold that many senior managerial posts. But more on that into a minute. First of all, let's talk about the playing career of Vicente del Bosque, which would have endeared himself to the Real Madrid fans before he even took up the job of manager. The midfielder was part of the team that won 5 La Liga titles and 4 Copa del Reys in the space of 6 years in the 1970s. However, on the European stage, Real Madrid was still not doing the business. In fact, between their 6th and 7th European title, there was to be a gap of 32 years. However, in the late 90s, when Real Madrid finally won their 7th title, it was to be their first of 3 in 6 years. The latter 2 brought to them by none other than Vicente del Bosque, of course. During those 4 years, he also won 2 La Liga titles as a manager, and after spending 1 year with Besiktas after leaving in 2004, he then went on to get the Spain job a few years later, probably due to his reputation with Real Madrid, and less to do with the rather meagre, uneventful 20 caps that he earned with Spain as a player. The Spain job was his last in football, and as I mentioned before, just one of 3 senior posts that he actually held. However, what a time he had of it. He managed to bring home 2 back-to-back trophies for Spain, which included the 2010 World Cup and the 2012 European Championships. This on top of them winning the European Championship in 2008, although Del Bosque wasn't in charge just then. This means that he'll forever be a Spanish legend after bringing them their first World Cup. However, the irony of the Madrista Del Bosque winning the 2010 World Cup with a team mostly made up of Barcelona players, well, let's just say that the irony is definitely not lost. Number 4, and we have our first Bundesliga manager on the list, and the other person, much like Didier Deschamps, to win the World Cup as both a player and a manager. Despite this godlike achievement though, Franz Beckenbauer will mostly be known for his play on the field. As a player, he was a once-in-a-generation kind of footballer, and his career saw him move from midfield to defence and eventually create, or at least rejuvenate, the role of the sweeper behind the defensive line. His elegant skill and leadership both on and off the ball were something that made him known as one of the greatest to ever play the game. However, as for his managerial career, well, it wasn't actually that impressive. As a manager, he did win the World Cup and also won the Bundesliga and UEFA Cup with Bayern Munich. However, this is made so much more impressive because Beckenbauer's reigns were short at best. He held 3 club jobs. 2 of them were with Bayern Munich, and all 3 of the jobs lasted less than 6 months. Still, this pales into insignificance as to what he won as a player. He picked up the Euros and the World Cup with Germany, as well as 4 DFB Pokals, 4 Bundesligas, 3 Champions Leagues, and 1 UEFA Cup with Bayern Munich. Moving into number 3, and one of the great sights that you don't really see in football anymore is the player manager. Now, it's probably because the roles of a player and a coach nowadays are so complex that it'd be really difficult to focus on both. However, a few years ago, it was rather common, and especially at the highest level. Before Alan Shearer was offered the Blackburn manager's role alongside being a player at the age of just 25 back in the 90s, there was Kenny Dalglish, who successfully did it for Liverpool. After 8 years as a player and in need of a new manager, the Liverpool board thought, why don't we just give the job to our most influential player? Well, Kenny Dalglish did just that and went on to provide the club with further success from the dugout. As for his player years at Liverpool, well, he brought them 5 First Division titles, 3 European Cups and 3 League Cups, so he definitely knew what to do on the field as a player. But off the field as player manager in his very first season, he brought Liverpool the double. First off, there was the FA Cup victory against Everton, and secondly, there was beating Everton to the league title by 2 points with a dramatic 1-0 win on the last day of the season over Chelsea. And the scorer of this dramatic goal in the 1-0 victory to bring Liverpool the title, of course, it was Kenny Dalglish, the player manager. As he decreased his own playing time in the next few years to focus more on his managerial role, he won 2 further First Division titles with Liverpool and another FA Cup, and during a very brief stint in 2012, he managed to bring 1 more League Cup title home to add to his tally. There's no wonder you can still hear his name being sung from the stands at Anfield. Second on the list now, and is someone who actually has one trophy less for the same club that he played and managed as Kenny Dalglish. However, you cannot underestimate what Pep Guardiola has given to football aside from trophies. Still in the prime of his career, he's got many managers viewing at him and what he does as the be-all and end-all. But this has pretty much come from one man who Guardiola himself looked up to. However, we'll get onto him in just a minute. For Pep, everything he did at Barcelona as a player made him such a standout guy. And as for managing, well, we haven't even spoken about City and Bayern Munich at the moment because he didn't play for them, but they can't be ignored in his managerial process either. As for his playing career at Barcelona, well, he was part of the team that completely dominated Spanish football in the 1990s, especially in the first half of the decade. There were 6 La Liga titles for him, 1 European Cup and 1 UEFA Cup. However, the European trophies didn't come in until he took over from the dugout. During his 4 years as first team manager, he managed to bring home 3 La Liga titles, 2 Champions Leagues and 2 Copa del Rey winners medals. All of this alongside unearthing Lionel Messi's inner talent. Now, we all knew Messi was going to be a great player and he was probably going to go on to be one of, if not the best, even if Guardiola hadn't helped him. But what he did was completely revolutionise the way that Messi and Barcelona played. So much so that in 2012, throughout the calendar year, Lionel Messi broke the record for the most amount of goals scored with an incredible 91 in just 69 games. Now, I know what you're thinking, who could possibly top that in terms of trophies and impact on football? Well, I present to you the number 1 on our list of top 10 players and managers who have successfully managed and played for the same team. So the number 1 spot on this list brings us to an absolute legend, and if Pep Guardiola is one of your followers, then you must be doing something right, which is exactly what Johan Cruyff was doing as a player and manager at both Ajax and Barcelona. Now, it wasn't just the trophies that he won at both clubs, 28 altogether, but the way that he took his learnings from legendary manager Rinus Michels and took them into a whole new level. The technical ability of Cruyff was unbelievable, and the way he viewed the space on the pitch not only allowed him to captain one of the greatest Ajax sides of all time, but also led them to many more titles after he stopped playing. This all whilst being in a supposed weaker league, which is something that is aimed at Ajax even today. As for his time at Barcelona, well, he took things to a new level and won absolutely everything, inspiring the likes of Pep Guardiola along the way. His legacy and beliefs in football are still so relevant today. When you look at how Barcelona did what they did in the last decade, how the likes of Manchester City and Bayern under Guardiola are doing what they're doing, it's all come from Johan Cruyff. Everything that he did 30, 40 years ago is still being seen today because it was that revolutionary. I mean, it was almost as if he drew the blueprint for football and then just passed it on. Or certainly he took what he knew from those before him and just made it even better. I mean, he's that good, he's even got a stadium named after him, the current Ajax Stadium. So there you have it, 10 of the best footballers to ever play for and coach the same team. Now, it doesn't matter how many trophies they got, it's pretty much about their impact on football as well. But what do you guys think? Who was your favourite on this list, and who else could we have put in there as a legendary player / manager? As for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, well, at the moment he's currently got 9 titles with Manchester United. Could he go on to get the job full-time and take them to many, many more? Maybe he'll even break onto this list at some point in the future. Of course, you can let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below, and also smash the like button whilst you're there, whilst clicking here to check out all of the other videos that we've got going on OneFootball. But until next time, I will see you guys later.